Welcome to Disrupted Science, the occasional conversation between the authors of the upcoming book, How the Internet Disrupted Science. I'm Kent Anderson, here with my co-author Joy Moore, and we're recording this on Wednesday, July 2nd, 2025. Hey, Joy.
Hey, Kent.
Look at us in our vacation wear, vacation anticipatory wear. We did not coordinate this. We just
We
showed up.
didn't. Yeah. I'm ready to hit the boat and you're what do you have there?
Just like a hot
Barbecue?
rod with a palm tree and a sunset. We actually are going for a nice long drive on Friday, to go for a hike and all that. So it's kind of appropriate. It works. It works. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, we've got a lot to cover today, so let's jump in. We're going to try a new topic area. We're going to try a new feature called news updates. Sounds right. So the first one is there was an editorial from the editors and former editorial writer for the New England Journal of Medicine, Robert Stanbrook. Published in Stat News, and I thought it was good that they did it. I mean, it's a day late and a dollar short because everything with the Maha movement is a day late and a dollar short because they're exploiting so much and they're just rushing headlong to dismantle everything they possibly can in a massive wave of destruction. But they made a very good point, which is that while the hypocrisy of the Maha movement complaining about how independent journals were corrupted by the pharmaceutical market, by cutting government funding, they're actually making it more likely that studies will have to be funded by private entities.
Hmm.
So government funding is actually the way to solve the problem of science being funded by commercial interests, and they're undercutting that. So that was an interesting bit of news. I'd look that up if you get a chance. And did you have any thoughts on that one?
I did. I thought it was good that they pointed that out. It seems fairly obvious. The money's going to come from somewhere. I think they were doing it more in defense of journals not being completely corrupted by pharma companies, as RFK and his folks have been claiming. So
Mhm.
that's important to get out there. Um, and it also raises the unanswered question of, well, what about the funding that's coming from other entities, other private entities, and what does
Right.
that mean? And we've seen over the last couple of weeks, conflicts of interest are not just about pharma companies
Mhm.
and medications. Conflicts of interest can exist in everywhere you look.
Right.
And so
Especially if
I'd
you're
like to see.
a lawyer running HHS, you might have a conflict of
Right.
interest.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I'd like to see some more pieces like this that are looking into conflicts of interest around non-regulated supplements, around vaccine litigation. All of these things have started to come out. But there's also conflicts of interest by things funded by tech companies
Mhm.
and policy institutes and people who raise money fear mongering about vaccine safety and things like that. So,
Right.
if we're going to put conflicts of interest on the table, then it might be good to go for it and look at it across the board.
Totally agree. Totally agree. The other bit of news that caught our attention was that the leader of Coalition S departed, which he was there for a number of years. And, so long, see you later. Don't let the door hit you where the good Lord split you.
Mhm.
But the other thing is that it also seems like Coalition S is downsizing because they're not replacing him. They're just letting the committee or panel or whatever they called it run things going forward. And disclosure of their financials was something that we ultimately got, and it showed A, what a small organization it is, and B, how much money they spent on kind of interesting things that I wouldn't have thought they were spending things on, a lot of technology and things like that. So it'll be interesting to see where this goes. I think it shows again that a lot of this activism is kind of running out of steam, and these organizations, people are moving on from kind of fully funded OA and fully funded OA bureaucracy.
Yeah, what is their ongoing reason for being. I mean, they put out their is it equitable or not hate-o-meter a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, yeah. And Alicia Wise just, I think she and her consultants just published kind of an article, an overview of the fair pricing approach that they think, there should be uniform pricing to try to commoditize scientific outputs into, certain bins of pricing and all of that. I don't think that's going anywhere because, it's a private market's better than
Yeah.
than this. And science is not one thing. Again, like you and I talk about in the book, it's not a single thing, but each field is different. Each field has different incentives, different conflicts, different financial structures and price points and things like that. So yeah, it's yeah. So I don't know what their role is anymore. It may be
So
the
can we
beginning
just,
of the end for them, I guess.
yeah, can we stop paying attention to them now and
Yeah,
move on?
move on. Let's do it. Speaking of moving on, we're going to move on to another new feature called Book Update. All right, so we're ready for our first book update. And long story short is when we started down this road, we went to initially to university presses and we made a certain amount of headway there. There's a whole story about that. But then at a certain point, thanks to peer review, we were convinced that this was a much more commercial work. And so we went to a commercial publisher and we got an immediate response. It was almost like within 48 hours, we had Globe Pequot saying, we want this book and we want to put you under contract and give you a nice advance and all that kind of stuff. We were like, hallelujah. So we finished the book. We pledged to ourselves to get it done in June. We exceeded our expectations and got it done. And I think we turned it in around June 8th. And then
Hmm.
we held our breath because we're like, well, this is the first time the publisher's seen our book. What if it comes back and it's oh no, this isn't what I thought it was. Oh my gosh, you guys are way off target. So yesterday we got an email and opened it, and it said, your book is absolutely fantastic. I do not have any recommended changes. Please send me a complete manuscript with all front matter, blah, blah, blah. This is such an important work. So we're in production.
We are in production. And then Ken, it was you got the email because you're the corresponding author.
I guess, yeah.
And sent me a text saying check your email, and I was driving and I couldn't, and so
Oh
I
no,
was
that's
holding my
right.
breath for an extra 30 seconds while I'm screaming at Siri, tell me, is it good or bad, so
Yeah, we have a there's an email reply all issue with this, but we've worked it out. But yeah, so you had extra suspense.
yeah.
So
But to be honest, that extra 3 weeks of holding our breath also helped us to um, come up with a few important revisions that I think
yeah,
really brought it home. And so if
yeah.
he had said yes on day one, we might have missed the opportunity to do that. Um,
Yeah, it all worked out really well, and we used our time. I think we used the time we had wisely, and it's. I love the project personally, and I'm thrilled that we're moving ahead. So that's the update on the book. When we have a cover and we have other important benchmarks that we reach, we will let you know. All right.
yep, looking forward to it.
All right. Now on to rants of the week. So we're going to drop the rock music here. All right. So my rant of the week is kind of going back to, I keep seeing people talk about the Wakefield study as bad science, which it was. It was fraudulent science, and Lancet got fooled. But in having been at the American Academy of Pediatrics when it came out, when the scientists there saw it, it was just puzzling. There was no antecedent to it. It was a small study. It was a weird study. It didn't make much sense scientifically. But the reason it had such a huge effect, in which a lot of people don't talk about this aspect of it, but it's probably the most important aspect of it, why it has had such a big and long-lasting effect, is that Wakefield pushed it to the public hard. He and his institution at the time set up extra phone lines, went after reporters, did a video news release, all of that stuff because he hadn't.
It was so premeditated.
Mhm.
It's impressive.
Yeah, it's kind of astonishing and it's noteworthy, right? So this wasn't science to inform scientists. This was science to drive public perception. And as it turns out, he had a reason for doing that. He was in trying to be an expert witness and he had a treatment and he was trying to make a lot of money and line his pockets. And I think my rant is that I think we need to be very cautious about any time any scientist, for any reason, takes things to the public first. They can do it for legitimate reasons. They can do it for the right reasons, but we should be skeptical of that because science is a process. It's not about definite answers. It rarely comes up with definite answers. It usually comes up with a step that then other people figure out how to integrate into other knowledge, other systems, other things like that.
Hmm.
So I think we just need to be watchful of that and remember that one of the things that Maha and those people will do, they will go directly to the public. And why are they doing that? Because they don't have science, they have a narrative. And that's their rationale for it. So my rant of the week is scientists, do your science for other scientists. If you want to go to the public, you better have a really good reason. And even then, I think we all need to be skeptical about why anybody would do that. So that's my rant.
That's a good rant. Um, there's when it comes to health information in particular, and I think we're in such a conundrum right now with both sides talking about the lack of public trust in
Hmm.
science and what
Hmm.
can be done about it. And it really is starting to feel like more information is worse.
Hmm.
And so this is a good time to step back and be on the right side of history
Yeah, I mean, if
as
we
much
get
as
our house in
possible.
order, I think we might actually start to regain some trust that we are taking ourselves and our work seriously again.
Hmm.
So, but you have a rant as well.
I have a rant. I wanted to complain about the habit of reporting out either actual or projected numbers of manuscript submissions, in particular by publishers and by publishing industry analysts. We've seen this more and more in corporate reports and in industry analyses of benchmarking the number of manuscripts are being submitted to a publisher as an important number for any number of reasons. And my view is the only reliable thing that we can know about numbers of manuscript submissions is that they affect costs. That's the only thing that is sure. It's not an indication of quality. It's not an indication of whether you are more popular than another publisher. And most importantly, these numbers in the aggregate across subject areas, across different journals, across specialties, across all of scholarly publishing, don't tell us anything about outcomes that this research will produce. And another thing is that we, at the same time, are reporting, bragging about, or increases in manuscript submissions and being worried about decreases in manuscript submissions. We're having a parallel conversation about how much crap is out there that's so expensive to clean up. And so I think the only person who should be really paying attention to these manuscript submission numbers might be James Heathers and his new foundation that might want to ask for some more money to clean up
Hmm.
the outputs of these new submissions. Um,
Right.
Looking at it from the perspective of future projections around funding, also not helpful. You can look at, you know, NIH is 35% of the global output of research funding, and 35% of that is getting cut. And that's, translates down into nothing. We don't know what that means. We could look at the numbers of institutes that have been, cut in half and combined and reduced. We could look at the number of individual researchers and their grants outside of a community, outside of a society or a discipline of study. I don't think we can infer anything about that. And if we're trying to sum up the entire scholarly publishing industry's, uh, quite frankly, APCs is what this really comes down to. Um, and to either raise concern or assuage some fears with some projections, not helpful. It's not helpful to the scientists who are out of work. It's not helpful to the scientists who are trying to figure out how to extend their research. And it's glossing off over the terrible outcomes that this funding is having on society. So that's my rant. I don't like it. Please stop doing it.
Yeah, and it also, brings to mind that there was always an assumption around the producer pays, the author pays, the funder pays model, that the funders were going to be reliable sources of money, and this would be a long-term solution. And I think what this is showing is A, they're not, and B, it creates this incentive to have more papers, and that's not a good thing.
Mhm.
So, we need to, yeah, I totally agree. I think, as an industry, we definitely have become a quantity over quality mindset industry, and I think that's shameful, frankly. So good rant.
Thanks.
Okay. Uh, Next up, our main feature, a terrible week for science. All right. So last week was pretty rough.
That was a
And
doozy. It was
that was
one
a,
thing after the other.
yep, I got back from a social event on Wednesday night, I think, and the headlines were so major that I just had to like sit up for 2 hours and write a post. And a lot of people read it. It was just for one day, a terrible day for science. But yeah, it was a heck of a week. So let's see, let's tick down the list. Let's start with the National Science Foundation potentially being kicked out of its building for housing and urban development. And the
So classic Trump administration, the house and urban development
I
folks kicking
know.
people out of their building. Come on.
Well, you had the sleepy neurologist who he took over HUD and bought a $30,000 dining set for his office. And so, I mean, these people are just, I don't know what it is with the HUD people, but now this new guy, he's a former football player. He runs a mega church in Texas, and he comes in and people are thinking that he actually wants to live in that building. So what he listed is the dedicated executive suite on the 19th floor. Now, this building was built specifically for NSF, for the National Science Foundation.
Hmm.
It's not that old. It's a nice building. He wants to
Yeah, it's
build
a
an
beautiful
executive
building.
dining room. He wants reserved parking spots for his five cars. Five
Uh,
cars.
how do you drive 5 cars to work at once?
It's his coterie. I don't know. I don't know. An exclusive secretarial elevator, so he doesn't have to talk to anybody. Space for his executive assistants, plural, on the 18th floor. So he will live on this 19th floor, and his vassals will cater to him from the 18th floor. And it's dedicated gym space for him and his family. So, all definitely public service oriented things here. And yeah,
Did
and
he think that his appointment meant that he was being housed in an urban environment?
development.
Yeah,
That looks like a
in
nice
an
urban
urban development.
development. I'll take that one. How about that? Well, Derek Lowe on his In the Pipeline blog kind of summed it up. He said, I feel like either vomiting or kicking a hole in the wall. Why not both? So the bureaucracy can be a good thing. And so the wheels kicked into gear for this one. and it looks like they're gonna, interrogate it to death, hopefully,
Yeah.
and keep everything there. And then also the other interesting thing is that HUD and NSF have the same union. So all their workers are part of the same union. So that may be
Oh.
another impediment to this going anywhere because those people may say, no, we're not going to let that happen to our brothers and sisters in the union. So
Hmm.
we'll have to see about that. Um, you want to talk about the next one?
Yeah, and that was last week we were talking about my rant last week was about being careful about what you publish, and it was an article in Nature, and then a couple hours later we get the notification that the US government had canceled their Springer Nature subscriptions.
Right.
So that was funny timing.
Mhm.
Uh and um what does it mean in terms of a big blow to the stability of the Springer Nature publishing business? Probably not that much. It's very not good optics to be on the wrong side of the Trump administration being singled out that way. Um, it was a little ironic given that in what was it, the first quarter earnings call, that when questioned about it, Frank Peters said that they seemed to be okay with the Trump administration and
Mhm.
especially their proclivity towards open access. That didn't turn
Mhm.
out as well as it could. What do you think, Kent? I mean, it's a big headline. Is it a scary thing or is it just a
Yeah, I mean, I think there are going to be a lot of publishers. I mean, Doge went after a lot of publishers. They cut a
hmm
lot of subscriptions, USDA, especially when that was under attack and kind of a focal point. I think Springer Nature in general has more headwinds than anticipated. I mean, their stock's down 22% year to date. And, so after the big IPO celebration, they've kind of, they have headwinds. And this is just adding to the headwinds. And the chaos and budget cuts and all of those things, it's just, part of another bad week for science. And you know, yeah, we'll have to see where this goes. I mean, the craziness is definitely not over with. Another thing that happened was an anti-vaccine misinformation specialist got a CDC vaccine safety role as a special government employee. Her name is Lynn Red. I know
That's
it.
such a polite way to describe her, Kent, as an anti-vaccine misinformation specialist. That
She's a
sounds like it's a
specialist.
technical. No, she's a
Yeah.
crazy lady who runs a wellness website and got invited to present a bunch of junk to a bunch of serious scientists.
Well, she used to be RFK Jr.'s boss at that Children's Health Defense, where he used to make $1.2 million a year walking around spouting
hmm
misinformation. And so she was the head of it. Now he's, given her, carte blanche to go in and, like you said, she's bad news. She's bad news on wheels. And now she has, a potential role in hurting children's health. So Children's Health Defense, the most ironically named group ever. And yes, I was being very nice, but yeah, she's crazy and sick and should be stopped. But anywho, hopefully the
A really
bureaucracy
good,
kicks into gear on that one too.
yeah. Well, a really good overview of the ins and outs of what's been going on with ACIP and the CDC and the FDA and other things is covered by the America Dissected podcast episode last
Yep.
week. It
Yep.
was really thoughtful. It tells you they tell us how it's supposed to work and then how it has been working in the last few days.
Right.
And so highly recommend giving that a listen. America Dissected
Yeah, Caitlin and her
and
co-host are
Abdul.
fantastic. Abdul, yeah, they're
Mhm.
fantastic. I love that podcast, and And they also how exasperated they sound is exactly appropriate. And but they,
Hmm.
you know, but they also always suck it up and try to find a way through, which is what professionals do. Another thing that happened is that RFK Jr. announced the US will stop supporting Gavi, which is the Global Vaccine Alliance. I think already projections from USAID and Gavi pullbacks are that 14 million unnecessary deaths will occur, premature deaths will occur. So it's terrible. I mean, this is how crazy these people are, right? So we have scientific interventions, medical and health interventions that are proven to save lives and prevent disease and despair, and they won't fund those things, even though they're super cheap and super effective. And again, just because they have this position now.
Well, and they're taking this strange perversion of a hero position by saying we're not going to give you money because you aren't practicing vaccine safety testing,
Right, right, right.
as if it was horrible until these people showed up and cut off their funding. It
Yeah.
makes the head spin.
No, no, it's absolutely terrible. And again, this gets back to something that we talk about in the book and that other people are talking about. And Anita Chan talked about, which is kind of the soft eugenics of this group. Like any chance they get to hurt people from what Trump called shithole countries or people who aren't like, the Kennedys or white or privileged, they seem to want to do it. And they have no problem doing it because they think there's some sort of long-term benefit, which is another thing, the long-termism of their thinking. Don't help people today if you hurt a lot of people today, but ultimately it's better for some concept you have of the future, then you're justified to do it. And I think that's sick on a whole different level. But
Hmm.
but there's
And
more
I
news. So,
And
I'm sorry.
well, just one more on that. What's even more insidious about that is even if they personally know that they're doing something wrong and that they don't believe it, but they're going to profit from it, the
Mhm.
people who do believe them, and are supporting them, are has a much greater effect, on everybody else.
Yeah,
So disingenuous or not, it's polluting everything.
yeah, absolutely. So one other thing that happened was that the Supreme Court made a ruling about Obamacare, which everybody thought looked good because it preserved it. But one of the little wrinkles there is that it gave RFK Jr. control over the U.S. Preventive Services Task Force, or PSTF. And that is the group that decides what gets reimbursed, basically. And so he could potentially deny coverage for PrEP treatments and other HIV treatments. He could deny coverage for certain vaccines. He could deny coverage for a host of other proven medical things that they don't like, or more likely, speaking of grifters, could allow insurance coverage for functional medicine, for supplements, for nutraceuticals, and things like that. So that Supreme Court ruling accidentally on purpose put him in the role of determining, well, actually the Biden administration is the one that created that dependency because they were afraid that if the Preventive Services Task Force were left outside of a department, it might be cause Obamacare to be ruled unconstitutional. So they slipped it under HHS, thinking it would be
Hmm.
safe there. And lo and behold, it's not with these
Dang.
people. Yeah,
So this is for reimbursement under Medicaid,
right,
correct? Yeah.
right.
Which drives so much of the whole healthcare industry. And so by changing what gets reimbursed by dropping things or adding things, it's really playing around with taxpayer money in order to change taxpayer behavior. Um,
Yeah, and potentially line the pockets of the people in control. So we'll have to watch this one too. Speaking of conflicts of interest, like we did before. So, we have
mhm.
to watch this because there are definite conflicts of interest here.
Yep.
Um, so that was kind of the big news of the week. Um,
There were
there
a couple
was,
of there were a couple of good things, right?
Yeah, there were a couple of bright spots. One thing we were a fan of is Holden Thorpe published an editorial in Science about the scientific community needs to take a look at its own role in this mess. And that we've kind of like we talked about, I think last week, there's too much self-loathing and too much recrimination and too much self-interest and not really focusing on making sure that the science is good and all of that. And that was good. So kudos to him for that. We did think that because he straddles an interesting role at AAAS by being, the head of a scientific publishing organization, or at least part of the leadership there, that he could have also called out scientific publishers a little bit more. And which led us to a really interesting essay by Radio Canada about what they called, and I love this phrase, dustbin science. And they were referring to paper mills, but they talk about how all of this has become a media game and publishers have allowed various entities to ruin the scientific publishing claim space, the claims space. And so I do think we need to think hard about our role in this. Our book talks about this a lot. And then lo and behold, who shows up? But and it's July 2nd, we're recording this. As you pointed out earlier, on July 1st, the Nelson memo went live. And who showed up with an essay talking about 10 times faster isn't 10 times better in science? It's Alondra Nelson. So we're seeing a
Mhm.
lot of people kind of eat their words around where they were before the bad days started,
Yeah.
and when they thought it was all safe to play around and be disruptive. And now we're kind of seeing the the downsides, and people are starting to get a little bit scared. They played with fire, and all of a sudden the bushes are burning, and the it's starting to crawl up the outside wall of the house, and they're like, whoopsie, maybe that wasn't
Oh
such a good
yeah.
idea.
Right now is a really easy time to be critical. Um,
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Two other bright spots, the AAP, the American Academy of Pediatrics, where I first came into scientific publishing, stepped up big time. And they
yeah, they
refused to,
didn't even attend the meeting.
no, they gave him the flip the bird, at the ASIP, and said this is invalid and politicized. We will not play along and be party to this. And we are going to issue our own vaccine recommendations. And because pediatricians are the frontline practitioners putting shots in arms of kids, they could become the de facto standard. And I think I didn't have time to chase this down, but I think they and a few other related organizations are actually going to be banding together to come up with recommendations, health
Yeah.
recommendations overall.
Hmm.
And so states and insurers and others can turn to those and hopefully get us through the dark days of Maha and more or less intact.
And we were talking about this a little bit. If it gets down to the state level, hopefully the states that share borders also share vaccine policies
Right, right.
because the flu doesn't know there's an imaginary line between Connecticut and Massachusetts.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Very true. Very true. And then the last bright point was Karen Wolf published an absolutely beautiful essay about on the Scholarly Kitchen about the important relationship between the humanities and the sciences. And I think that she's a great writer. She's a fantastic historian. She's a great academic, fantastic person. And the sentence that really jumped out at me was the idea that only science really matters has been enormously destructive. And I think that's absolutely true. You look around at what makes life worth living, and it's not just that, it's not science. It's a lot of other
mhm.
things. And how science gets implemented requires a lot of smart people with a lot of other skills and abilities to make sense of it, put it into context, and then deliver it in a meaningful way to make a difference. So,
Mhm. Yeah, and I think we can trace some of that back to the academic capitalism coming out of World War II that created this publish or perish competition for dollars, for research funding, for outputs. And we're talking about science in terms of um, reports equals metrics equals outputs. And that's pulled the sciences in some way farther from the rest of academia,
Mhm.
that's more focused on inquiry and results.
Yep. Yep. I agree. And I think one of the things that is interesting, there was a preprint, we talked about this earlier out about, and so it's a preprint and so it's preliminary, but it makes a lot of sense. I think anyone could have told you this would be found at some point, but users of ChatGPT gradually use it so much that they become bad writers. They don't even remember what they wrote. They purportedly wrote. They don't remember how to write. They lose the skill. Use it or lose it kind of thing. And that also matters because how we write is how we think. One of the editors I worked with said, writing is nature's way of making you think. And so if we are handing over, like, the ascendancy of science is one thing, the ascendancy of tech is another. If we start giving our brains over to tech and just substituting those things in and letting them run us, we're going to lose a lot of our abilities to see when we're being duped, to understand when people don't have our best interests at heart, and to make the world a better place. So we need all hands on deck, everybody doing their best human work.
Yeah, and you know what? Be confident in the fact that you're a human too. I mean, there's
Yeah.
a lot of people who are saying, well, I'm using, Chat GPT to check my work or to optimize my resume, my essay, my whatever. You don't need Chat GPT to optimize your thoughts.
No, no. Leave a fingerprint. You were here.
Yeah.
You were great. All right. So that's the news of the week. It was a rough week. We'll keep track of it on the Geyser. We'll keep track of it here. We wanted to bring you up to date and also give you some points of light in this. There are people out there thinking hard about it, doing the right thing, and kudos to all of them. All
Yes.
right. On to discoveries of the week. All right. So my discovery of the week, speaking of leaving a fingerprint on things, is I discovered that
But
somebody,
bump.
bump, yeah, hey, leave it to me for a bad dad joke. But somebody invented, and I'm a little slow to this, device called the third thumb.
Hmm.
And it's amazing to see. You got to go online and check out the video. Try to remember to put a link in the show notes, as they say. But it's a device that you strap on and it goes over here. I can't do it because that's impossible. But it goes on next to your pinky on whichever hand, and it wraps around like a thumb. So you have the oppositional force on the other side, and it's activated by your big toe via a wireless connection that's strapped to your ankle. And so what was interesting is that they showed how plastic the brain was because so people loved to use it. They thought it was fascinating to use. And then they did brain scans at various intervals of people using it. And what they found is that their brain got confused for a little while
Hmm.
about which thumb and what's toe, what's thumb, what's the other new thing, and all that, and then gradually straightened itself out and could become facile with everything. And I think, that's exactly how I think all of us experience learning. First of all, you struggle, and then your
Hmm.
body kind of adapts and you figure it out. But then it's such a cool looking device. And the other thing I'll just mention is I'm proud that it was in Science Robotics, which is a journal that, with the help of some other people, I pushed to have launched and got approval for launch. So it's kind of like, oh, that's so cool. Look at that journal throwing off third thumbs. So, so look that up. It's fascinating to see. As a keyboard player, I was talking to another musician and we are like, yeah, that'd be awesome. We could really play some amazing chords with a third thumb. Solos take on a whole new, so anyhow, it's like a 12-string guitar for you guitarists, right? We got
Yeah, the flamenco is gonna go crazy, right?
That's right.
What do
Who
you
needs an
do?
arpeggiator? I'm just gonna strap on my third thumb and I'll get this taken care of. work my big toe to death. So anyhow.
So does that mean like four thumbs up or
Yeah, I'll give that invention
yeah.
4 thumbs up. Perfect. Nice.
That was a three thumbs down joke. I apologize. Um, so my discovery of the week, which is it's a good summertime discovery that may be useful to some folks out there, um, is happywhale.com. And I learned about this on a segment of the PBS NewsHour the other night. And the headline was about scientists using AI for recognizing whales, humpback whales, by their tails. So their tail is like a fingerprint or a face. And there's a database that's maintained by scientists, but also they've opened it up to members of the public. So when you're out whale watching, maybe this weekend over the holiday, and you snap a picture of a humpback whale tail, you can send it in, you can look it up, and you can find out all sorts of things. So they've been this database and this project has been in existence for quite a few years now. And I looked into the people behind it, and it's the main guy who was on the news program is named Ted Cheeseman. And he grew up, his parents were eco um, expedition
Mm,
guides. So
hmm
he grew up exploring Antarctica and other places around the
hmm.
world. And more recently, he's branched off into biology, and he started this database. And so, and they've published a lot of papers based on the data. Their data set is available for scientists to use to do their own analyses and papers, and they have a pretty straightforward terms and conditions for what to do with the data. And I couldn't log in because I'm not a scientist, and I thought that was terrific. Um,
Yeah, it's fair.
so check out happywhale.com. You can see how far they travel. You can see who
Mm.
they're related to. You can, I see it in the future. It's going to be the real housewives of the humpback whales because who knows where they're supposed to be and where they're not, but now all eyes are on them.
Oh my gosh, the Real Housewives of the South Pacific. Here it comes. Yeah, you showed me that. It was amazing and beautiful. And if you've ever seen a whale breach and been out on a whale watching tour, they're amazing animals and let's take care of them and snap pictures of them whenever we can.
Hmm.
They'll wave a tail at you. That's why they're doing it. They're like,
Yeah.
look at me, look at me. All right, everybody. We may or may not be back next week. It depends. It's a busy week. But in the meantime, have a happy 4th of July. And
So Kent, I've been told
yes.
that we need a better sign off because
Oh,
this is
okay.
this awkward time at the end of the podcast. So,
Okay. So now I have to do some
um,
editing.
no, we're supposed to keep it in. So
Oh,
I
oh,
think
we're
this
gonna keep
week's,
all this in.
yeah,
Oh,
this week's
wow.
sign off is
So our sign off's gonna be struggling to get a good sign off. So Joy has a new sign off, everybody.
the
See what you
sign off
think.
is just stop the podcast.
That's right.
No, I was gonna say keep it classy, San Diego.
Oh, there it is. Our new sign off. Vote for it now. You can reach us at disruptedscience@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. And
Tell
what
us
was
how
it
to sign
again?
off.
And tell us how to sign off. Keep it classy, San Diego.
Yes, Anchorman. Get it?
Oh, oh, man. All right. If you're not watching this on YouTube, Joy has a big anchor on her shirt. So, all right. Keep it classy, San Diego.